I'm going to review what's in this box here. Stick around and find out what it is. So I've got a whole bunch of Siglent reviews to do. Rob from Tabrica Technologies dropped in the other day and dropped off 4 boxes of Siglent things for me to do reviews on. This is the first one. The other things are rather expensive items, so it's going to be quite interesting. So we get started with this. Product catalogue. I'll look through that later on. Oscilloscope probe, so obviously it's a scope that's in here. Power cable. It's not just an unboxing video. Someone criticised a video the other day saying, oh, this is an unboxing video, because they obviously didn't watch any more than the first few minutes of a 30-minute video. My videos are more than unboxing videos. I just do the unboxing as well. Right, here we go. Quick start guide, USB cable, CD with software probably on it, manual as well probably. Calibration confirmation thing. Okay, the usual stuff you get with Siglent gear. And here's the scope. There'll be links down below as well to Rob's website where he sells these things and maybe some other stuff too, we'll see. Anyway, so it's the SDS2104 XL Plus. It's one of the lowest cost Siglent oscilloscopes you can get. So this is like one of the real entry level ones. So we'll see what the feature set is like on this compared to some of the more advanced scopes that they sell. Got a hard power switch on the top. I like hard power switches. So you've got 2 channels and an external input as well. So like external trigger. Obviously you've got calibration port as standard. You got individual vertical controls. You've got horizontal time-based controls, all individual ones, so that's quite nice. Standard button layout for Siglent stuff pretty much. It's very similar. All got the same kind of format. You've got soft buttons down the side here. Got a menu button up here. I haven't used the scope at all, as you saw. I just unwrapped it, so I've got no idea what this is actually like. Done no research. So you've got a pass fail output on the back, LAN connection, which is nice. Most cheap scopes don't have things like LAN connections. And a USB device connection as well. Power socket there, and USB port on the front as well, which means you can probably do like external saves to USB and things like that. Maybe other things. This particular scope is a 50 MHz version, and it's got 500 megasamples a second. So let's plug in the power for the first time. At least the first time for me. I don't know if Rob's been playing this one or not. Rob's usually pretty good at actually doing like firmware updates and stuff. If there's a firmware update on something, he'll do that before he actually sells it and passes it on. So got power turned on. Push the button. Got to count the boot up time, shall we? Wait till you get 15 seconds. Or 45 seconds. See how quickly it boots up. It's always a nice test. Nice screen. I think it's an 800 by 600 resolution, something like. That's less than 15 seconds. That's not bad. It's got a tilting feet in the bottom. Let's pop those out so we can see a bit better. Let's get a closer look. So this is how this particular unit's booted up. System status, starter times 2. So I'm guessing then that maybe that could be a factory startup, even, who knows. But basically a brand new scope. Single Q exit. Should know the users by now. We've used Siglent stuff for long enough. Got option for sound counter. It's got a frequency counter option, which in this case is shown up down here. Language options, different ones there. That's what we want anyway. Next page. Self cal, we're done to that because I just turned it on. Self test. Backup USB, so USB TMC. It means something, I don't bloody know what it is, but when you plug a flash drive into here. Pass fail setup, which is the output on the back. Firmware update. Recording. I'm not sure what that's about yet. And how do I go back? How do you go back a menu? Doesn't have an obvious way of doing it here. Single? No. Okay, my first hiccup. We'll hit the utility button over here and it's brought this menu up, so it's close enough. It's kind of back where we were. In-out setting, it's actually got GPIB options, that's interesting. Based on IP address, this is obviously the LAN setup. Yeah, interesting. This one's got a return key. So it looks like the other menu didn't have a return option, which it kind of needed. Because I did the record and there's no way of getting back, is there? There's no option. If you hit that one. Okay, a little bit of a GUI issue there. Screensaver time, so I'll turn the screen off to save the backlight in my view. And I don't know what this recorder thing is, I've got no idea. I'm not familiar with that. It may or may not have already been compensated. It's got purple rings on it. We want to do yellow ring because it's channel 1. Both of these probes had purple rings on, or pink. Oh, maybe they're pink or purple. And they change those over. Alright, so that's those rings off. Let's put the new ones on and we get it set up. See if the actual thing is working right or not. This is just the, you know, obviously you don't have to do this, but it just helps you know what channel's which when you have your probes hooked up and cables crossed over and all mixed up and messy all over your table. There you go, channel 1. Okay, 10 times, yes, otherwise it won't be compensated. So 10 times on there, and there we go, there's our waveform. And do channel 1 because that's the right channel. Bring it down. We'll lower it down a bit like this. Obviously it's set to DC coupling. That's looking fine, there's no compensation we need. I mean, it's got a little bit just here. I'll give a closer look at this. So it's got a little bit of undershoot just here and there. Almost nothing. I mean, on the positive side, I think maybe it's looking about right. I might give it a slight tweak to see if I can get that slightly better, but it's nothing to it really. It's almost nothing at all. There you go. That's basically right now. It looks like I might have some overshooting on the other side though. See the top's overshooting? It's a bit of a balance. Yeah, it's about there somewhere, isn't it? Yeah, you can see here it's overshooting, it shows up more there. So let's just get this right. It's probably better where it was before I started. Yeah, it's looking fine there, that'll do. Yeah, that's marginally better than it was, but not much. Okay, I made a small mistake. The other probe's already got the yellow things on it. I might have to change this one over now. Oops. So most scopes, it's really common. In order to save resources, the ADC and stuff like that is all shared between channels. So this is a 2-channel scope. So if you go to use both channels, or you have a second channel turned on, even just sitting there idle, you're going to drop your sample rate in half. So it'll be 250 megasamples a second, for example. So it's shared across both channels. So if you use one channel, turn the second one off if you're not using it, and that'll give you the best options on the scope for that. I will actually hook this thing up and do a bandwidth measurement on this. I actually will see what this thing drops off at. I mean, it's specified at 50 megahertz minimum, right? That's like a guaranteed frequency. So it should be able to get 50 megahertz, no problem. These probes that come with it are 70 megahertz probes, so no problem with the probes themselves. So we'll see what the 3D point is on this thing and work out what its actual maximum frequency is in this particular instance. It can vary from scope to scope. So the first thing I'll do is the boring bit. I'm going to go through the menus and look at all those things and let's see what features it's got built into it from the menu system, and maybe get some ideas of how it compares to some other scopes. Maybe things there which I may notice are missing or enhance which other scopes I've tried have actually not had themselves. So I've got a few Siglent scopes, so it'll be interesting to see what this one's actually got compared to them. So cursors, quite a common thing. Cursors, manual, tracking, auto. Tracking cursors. That's an interesting one. So it's got some data here. Delta values and what have you. Time frames. I actually should put a waveform on this thing. It might be easier to see what's going on. Let's do that. Yeah, so we got off, manual, which is manually adjusting the actual cursor lines. You can do horizontal vertical for time frame or voltage. Tracking means it's automatically trying to determine where it is, and auto, same thing. I don't tend to use cursors, to be honest. I don't actually tend to do it. So let's turn that back off. Require menu, this is quite common. Sampling, peak detect and averaging. Yeah, averaging if you want to get noise out of a signal, for example. Sine X or X. Mode real time. Equivalent time. Sample rate 250k. Can't change that right now. Yeah, it's got to the time base. There you go. So as I'm putting a slower time base, the sample rate's dropping because it's got to capture more data, obviously. So if I wind this up, 500 Ks per sample. So I'm injecting a 10 MHz signal here. I need to get the triggering set up right, but it's there. Gives you an idea at least. So there's the 500K points there. 1.2 meg there. So here we go. That's a mega samples now. And there we go. So before I was having trouble with the triggering because I was actually getting aliasing. I was actually looking at an aliased waveform, not the real waveform. I was going too slow with the time base. I should have actually noticed that. Yeah, this is just aliasing, which is what I couldn't trigger. And now we're actually seeing the real waveform over here. Alright, so that's the slowest or the fastest time base I can do. And let's say it's a 10 MHz signal there. Hide the menu. So that's what you can see on 10 MHz. It's a nice clean waveform anyway. It's showing nice and sharp. Okay, so that's the acquire menu, I think. Yeah, that's all that done. Save recall means you can use the flash drive. You can save your setup, waveforms, picture, CSV or factory setup. Saving to device or file. Choose those. Choose setups, saving and recalling down here. Right. Again, I don't tend to use that much. I might do it for doing stream captures. If you want to save a sample, or maybe CSV if I'm trying to save that information. Measurements, so I can do measurement voltage or peak to peak. Not sure how many we can actually select at once. I'm not sure. Just leave that one. Volts or miss, edit, and that's showing up just here. Let's do. Go to peak to peak. So where's peak to peak? That one, edit. I did nudge it up. There we go. We've got two measurements down there now. I think there's probably a limit how many you can show at once. Time, period, frequency. We've already got frequency counted down here anyway, so you probably don't really need to worry about that one. Delays or measure, which gives you the whole display. The only problems with these is that you end up with a big fill over the screen, obliterating your waveform. So sometimes you don't really want that much information, and that's when these ones down the bottom here are really handy. So I actually always have RMS and peak to peak set up. Well, somehow I've selected max. Yeah, I always have RMS and peak to peak set up for this bottom display on my scope. So I've always got those measurements there. And if I need to do more, then I'll turn on your measure and see your other stuff which is available. But yeah, that's quite a handy little feature if you just want to quickly check something. Pop in there, turn them on, and you're done there. Intensity and stuff like that is in here under display. Brightness is not turn up the high persistence, so you can do persistence on the waveforms, which means you've got a varying waveform, it will show up. So if I do say 5 seconds, and I'll change the frequency. You see it's done that, and they'll pop off after 5 seconds. There you go. So I changed it to 11 MHz there from 10. I'm going to go back to 10 from 11. So if you've got any glitches on your waveform, and they're only instantaneous ones, and you see like occasional glitches, that help to show that up if using persistence. Turn it back off for now. Type of vectors or dots. Dots actually show you where the samples are. So that actually gives you an idea. Oh, it hides it there. The same as I think it's the Handtech did that. You went to a certain speed, it turned off dots and showed you vectors instead. This is doing the same thing. So here's showing dots. There's dots there and there. So actually getting, yeah, see these? So it's actually increasing the distance between the dots at the lower frequencies because you'll capture more. So maybe it is actually doing okay. But that looks like it's going to vectors at that point there, and that's dots. Yeah, interesting. So I'll push the next button there. We've got Y and T, which is your standard time format, and XY as well. So you're doing XY measurements, you can do that there. Screen normal and inverted. Oh, that's interesting. I think I prefer normal. Why do you want that? That's just, I don't know. I suppose maybe you want a bright display, but I really don't like the look of that, to be honest. I definitely prefer that view. Got different grids, you can choose different types you want. I always basically use the default one. Menu display infinite, so it can automatically hide the menu when you finish using it. you know, or you can just push the button yourself if you prefer. Alright, next page. Skins, succinct. Skins? Okay. Oh, right, different colour schemes. Again, this is a bit like what the Handtech had. I think it was a Handtech, or a Unity, I can't remember now. One of them had this, so you can actually change this colour schemes. And to be honest, I actually prefer the default one. That one there. And then utility menu, which is where we kind of were before, looking at all this other stuff, which we started out with here. It's got inbuilt help, so you can do certain functions and it will tell you what it is. Like this, it will tell you what that function is doing. Alright, so it could be helpful to you if you're new to scopes. Channel options, I did kind of show this before when I pushed the channel 2 button, but coupling is DC, AC or ground, common things. Bandwidth limit is off and on, so on is a 20 MHz bandwidth limit. Volts division, fine and coarse. Well, this is the positioning, and this is the actual adjustment here. So if you need to do really small adjustments because you're trying to fit something on screen, maybe, I don't know, but generally coarse is what you want to use. I've cut this probe at 10 times because that's the default, because normally you have a 10 times probe. I always recommend using a probe, use 10 times, not 1 times, because 1 times limits your bandwidth considerably. Might be down to 6 MHz instead of full bandwidth. I'm using a BNC cable right now, so this should actually be 1 times probing setup, which means my measurement's going to be out by 10 times. Just bear that in mind, because I'm not going to bother changing it. Inverting, filter. It's got any filter types in here, so you can trim off like high pass filters, stuff like that. So you got let's try and interpret these. So that's high pass, low pass, band pass, and notch filter. I wish I just put the names there instead of the symbol. The symbol's not as easy to interpret. In the last page, units. So if you're doing current measurements, maybe you want to change it to read amps instead, for example. Right, so amps and volts. And you also got skewing, so which allows for time delay if you're doing like a power measurement or something. So if you do default setup, that will basically put it back to factory settings. We'll do that. And there we go, factory settings, slow, time based and stuff like that. So we need to bring all this back up again because we're using these ones, vertical measurements. So that's that. Yeah, so with triggers, you've got single trigger, normal thing. So if you do that, always trigger once and then stop. So you're trying to capture a single event, you can do that. You've got the run stop as well, which means you can just re-trigger it manually like that. There's also a force button down here, I'm not quite sure what it does yet. Auto triggering, and that's running like that. Now the trigger menu also offers some other options. Trigger mode, for example, like you've got edge. Let's go through these first. Edge, pulse, video, slope, and alternate. Channel source, so 1, 2, or external. Even AC line if you want to be AC linked. Slope, positive, negative, alternating. Mode, auto, normal, and single. So auto means it's basically constantly going. Normal means it will just trigger every time there's a trigger. Single means it will just go off once. It's also got a setup in here as well, DC coupling for the trigger, AC, high frequency rejects, low frequency rejects, hold off, which is good for doing things like auto measurements. And I need to set up a certain amount of hold off in order to be able to capture the waveforms properly, otherwise you get aliasing and all sorts of confusion messing up the triggering. So I've now turned on 90% AM modulation. As you can see, it's going absolutely crazy because it doesn't know what to look at. So what we'll do is bring this thing down so we can see the audio waveform. Now you're starting to see this. Alright, that's what I'm looking for. So we're at 10 milliseconds per division. And you can see we're not getting decent triggering. If I mess with the trigger level, which is currently sitting centered, that might help slightly, bring it up a little bit. But it's still going to be jumping around. You haven't got a decent trigger. So we need to do the hold off to bring this down to where we want. Because what we're doing with the hold off is you're telling it to stop sampling for a minute. Right, well, it still samples, but it stops triggering for a second, right? So let's look at math functions. That's another button over here. So source addition from channel 1 and channel 1 again. So it's adding them together. What are the options here? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and FFT. FFT. By the way, you can push these buttons as well to scroll down, so you're using the knob if you prefer. And here's an FFT function on it. That's nice. When I was doing the level control on here, oh, there we go, it's affecting the FFT level. Is it something to do with that, maybe? Yeah, it's shifting the FFT level down, so it's not controlling this level. So you can change the span of the FFT, which is shown here, 200 MHz, by changing the zoom here. Or you push the button even, might be easier. So 1 times, 2 times, so it's changing each time. 2 MHz span. Yeah, okay, it's not the most user-friendly way of doing it, I suppose. Split display, full screen display, which doesn't overlay obviously. Reference waveforms, so if you do have a reference waveform, you can, a waveform sample that you want to replicate and check something's within tolerance of that, you can do reference waveforms on this. Can't say if I've ever used that myself. Horizontal menu, we got, or delayed sweep. Here we go, yes, that's more useful. So if you're trying to zoom in on a waveform and inspect it, then you can do that. So trigger menu, I think we all looked at this, didn't we? Set 50%, which means it should put the trigger point half up the screen. Should do. Yeah, it is, there you go, you can see it there, but there's no arrow, it shows up over here. I miss this being over here. So you got set to 50% button here, you push that, it drops it to 50%, so right now, it's got it offset here, so you got one showing up just here, which is the, probably could barely see it actually, that's the 0 volt reference for that, so you can obviously move up and down, and there's the T for trigger point, so if you set that at 50%, it goes to that point there. And you've got false trigger, which does something, level, which also does the same thing as saying 50%, puts it in the centre. Okay, that's all that stuff done. So also mentioned this thing does have a fan, but it's not that noisy. It's there, it's running, I can hear it, but it's not that bad. It's noticeable if you're actually sort of thinking, oh, is there a fan? Yes, there is. But it's probably not that bad really. I think it's probably fine. I mean, if you've got 5 or 6 bits of gear with fans in, the noise is going to come up a bit obviously, but I think this is okay. I think it probably could be quieter, but it's not too bad. So I was sort of debating whether or not I should do a tear down this thing. I mean, this isn't my scope, I don't own it, so I'm going to not tear it down. I'm sure there probably are tear downs on the internet already for these things, but there's not really much to see in them really, to be honest. Based on like the price point of this thing and comparisons with other scopes I've done reviews on which are similar kind of price range as this thing, this is definitely better. So I've looked at Handtech, Unity, and there's another one I've looked at which I've done reviews on. Go and check out my test gear review playlist to find them all. I might even have an oscilloscope review list, not quite sure. Comparing to those, this is definitely better. Its update rate is faster, the waveform is definitely clean and stable, it's all doing what it should be doing basically. I'm very happy with it. Let it run again, put on single, so running. So it's definitely looking good, right? I'm happy with it. Compared to some of the other cheaper scopes I've done, which are similar price bracket to this, the quality of those scopes is not as good as this. Now I've spoken around the menu before, so update firmware, pass fail stuff. You've got these other menus, you've got recorder, which I still need to figure out. Screensaver does work, I did have that working. Save recall, setups, factory. This was interesting, right? Factory, come down here. So I did save recall, down to factory, update BW. It's got a license in here for the bandwidth. Interesting. But what we should actually do now is actually look at the 3 dB point for this thing. So let's do measurements. Voltage measurement. So I'm injecting 1 MHz right now. I've got exactly 1 volt coming in. Well, perceived as 1 volt. I've got a 10 times probe setting and things like that. So I've got tricking basically. So I've got it registering 1 volt. We'll see what we can get out of this thing and see how good it ends up being. So first let's try a different frequency. Let's try say 100 kHz. There we go, it's actually got slightly better there. Now we've got a full waveform on there. So let's do 2 MHz. Yeah, that's fine. 5. Still fine. 10. Still fine. 20. It's dropped slightly. But still fine. 30. 40. Don't forget it's a 50 MHz rating. 50. So by now it should be 707 millivolts showing up for the 3 dB point at 50 MHz, and it's exceeding that. Let's do 60. Still good. 70. Still good. 100. Oh, it's below it now. 90. Okay, there we go. It's 90 there. So 95. Yeah, so it's kind of 95 megahertz is actually the 3 dB point on this thing. That's pretty good. So that makes it basically twice what it's rated at. Although I don't have a terminator on here, I'm just feeding straight in from my generator, so I don't have a 50 ohm terminator. That may be affecting things. So I'll just fit a terminator just to rule this out. Obviously it drops the levels down, and I've readjusted the output level, so it's back at 1 volt at the beginning like it was before. And we're now getting 105 megahertz at about the 3 dB point. That's impressive. It's twice what it says it's supposed to be. That's alright. Well, I think I'm going to call it a day for this thing. Check out the other videos at the end, other reviews I've done. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. And thanks Rob for loaning me this unit. Bye.